What's going on, guys? It's Fantasy Stock Exchange here, bringing you another installment of our free agency predictor video. We're basically, we're hopping in position by position and kind of determining potential landing spots for some of the top free agents available in this year's free agency class. So if you guys are seeing this is actually going to be the second installment of the wide receivers video. We talked through all the AFC teams, actually wide receivers and tight ends, my bad. Talked through all the AFC teams. Well, today we're going to be attacking the NFC. Before we do that, though, Corey, how you doing today?
Yep, doing good. This is the last of a 6-part video series. We did, as Danny mentioned, AFC wide receivers on Wednesday. Last week, we did the running backs, both AFC and NFC. And then 2 weeks ago, we did the quarterbacks, both AFC and NFC. So if you guys missed those videos, I encourage you to go check them out. They had a lot of value, basically kind of the direction that we see these teams going in, whether it be the draft, free agency, big name free agent, low end free agent, big name draft pick, low end draft pick. I think it's good to get a sense of that before you get into Dynasty startup season. So you're not just assuming that Jamar Chase, for example, is going to Cincinnati and Joe Burrow's value is going to go up. I think it's a good way to get a sense of kind of what's going to happen around the league and where these guys might go. And while we're not going to get all these predictions right, I think what we're going to get right is the direction that they go. Because we didn't get the fact that Matt Stafford went to LA right, but we did get the fact right that Matt Stafford was going to get traded away from Detroit.
Bingo. Understanding and being able to both predict and anticipate these certain moves is how you get the edge, how you get the curve on the rest of your league in terms of whether you're dynasty drafts or you're doing research in the offseason or you're in your startup right now. All of this can help. So understanding and being able to predict these free agency spots, being able to predict these team needs, how they can fill those needs is just a one step away from really being able to get, again, that edge.
Yeah, and we actually got Pittsburgh's quarterback situation right too. We didn't say they were going to sign Dwayne Haskins, but we did say they're going to bring in someone low end to back up Ben. I think I said Ryan Fitzpatrick would be who they'd bring in, but Dwayne Haskins, Ryan Fitzpatrick, just a low end veteran backup that's capable, which is basically exactly what they did. So before we get into the NFC teams that we're going to be talking about here, we're going to hit the intro and then we'll see you guys on the other side.
Okay, so as Corey was mentioning, we're going to start off with the NFC teams. And first division, we're going to go through the NFC North. Now, Corey, what do you think the Packers are going to be able to do to really combat that wide receiver two that the whole fantasy community has been clamoring for years now?
Yeah, we started off with the sexy pick. Everyone wants us to talk about the Packers in the wide receiver position because literally any video that you go on relating to free agency is going to say that the Packers need a wide receiver. I'm not sure I agree with that. Like I think they're just fine with what they have, but we're going to cave in here. We're going to pander to you guys and we're going to give them a wide receiver. And not only that, we're going to give them a big name wide receiver too, because Aaron Rodgers has been on the doorstep of the Super Bowl two years straight. He's lost in the NFC Championship game. Let's get him another playmaker that can stretch the field also, because Marquez Valdes-Scantling's pretty solid, but he's not the most consistent guy in the world. And I think you can get a true 1B to Devontae Adams. Everyone wants it to happen. Maybe the Packers finally listen this year, give Aaron Rodgers a fighting chance, and they're going to sign Will Fuller to a 3-year, $52 million contract. Basically, the reason Will Fuller is going to leave Houston is because they're going to probably trade Deshaun Watson, which means you're in a full status rebuild at that point. There's probably no reason to give an injury-prone wide receiver a big contract if Deshaun Watson's no longer there.
Definitely. I mean, we talked about it with Houston before too. They're not really in a financial position to bring back Will Fuller. And you look at it from a profit standpoint, some team's going to give Fuller a big payday. If you're Houston, you can't be one of those teams, because if a team does give him that payday, guess what? Due to the comp formula, you're getting a 3rd or a 4th round pick. You're heading into a rebuild. That 3rd or 4th round pick is going to be more valuable to your team in the long run than Will Fuller will be on that contract. So from a financial standpoint, I do think he's gone. And as you mentioned, Green Bay needs that real field stretcher type receiver to really complement what Devontae Adams is able to do. I mean, he's good at everything, but as more so the possession guy of the offense, getting Will Fuller to really keep defenses honest will help a ton. And obviously, again, giving Aaron Rodgers another reliable weapon is going to be huge for them. So I love the fit here too. And again, as you mentioned, the whole fantasy community has been clamoring for this to happen. I mean, I still remember everybody was preparing their freaking graphics with Will Fuller in a Green Bay jersey by the trade deadline last year. Everybody was ready to tweet that out, and the Texans hold firm. So
yeah. I think Will Fuller going there too makes the most sense because I don't think they're going to target a receiver in the draft because I mean this is a win now team. I mean they already showed that they're forward thinking in the draft minded way that they kind of drafted last year, drafting Jordan Love and AJ Dillon and Josiah DeGuara due to their impending free agents. But I do think if they're going to bring in a receiver or a kind of receiver of note, it will be a veteran and not a draft pick. So whether this is Will Fuller, whether this is Kenny Golladay, whether this is Allen Robinson, whether this is Corey Davis, if they bring in anyone, I think it's a free agent.
yeah, no, and I fully agree. Going into the next team here, we have highlighted, but as we know, their top two receivers are pretty much set in stone.
Take a drink every time you guys hear us say tertiary in this episode, because that's the type of receiver that the Minnesota Vikings are bringing in because they have Justin Jefferson, the best young receiver in the NFL, and Adam Thielen, who's a very capable veteran, more than capable veteran. So they don't need really a number one or two receiver. Their offense still runs through Dalvin Cook. They have Irv Smith at tight end, who's a young ascending player. So I think if they add a receiver, maybe it's like a field stretcher that they want to add, or maybe,
I was just going to say that.
Maybe a big bodied red zone threat or something like that. But it's probably not someone that's going to be overly relevant for fantasy. Maybe not for the next couple years, unless Adam Thielen maybe has a down year this season. Maybe that guy steps into his role 2 years from now.
Yeah, maybe like a young rookie contract in like the 4th or 5th round. You're talking about there's a ton of real burners in this year's draft. I've gone through this multiple times, but I swear 80-90% of the receivers in this draft are like 5'9", 185 pounds and run like 4.3, 4.4. Like it's actually ridiculous how many of those guys are there in this class.
And the only one that actually matters is Jaylen Waddle.
Yeah, for sure. So I completely agree. Getting that third receiver that can really complement, again, obviously you got the route running in the hands of Jefferson and Thielen. Getting a guy who can stretch the field and give those guys more space underneath is going to be crucial for their offensive scheme. Again, with Gary Kubiak actually leaving as well. A little side note. But yeah, let's get into the next team. And we all know that Detroit is in a weird pickle. They just met, as you mentioned, they just traded away Matthew Stafford to the LA Rams, ended up taking on Jared Goff's contract, in the process. That puts them in a weird spot because, again, as we mentioned, they don't have Kenny Golladay or Marvin Jones re-signed at this point. And by taking on Jared Goff's contract, they're not in the financial position to really bring either back, nor so I don't even think they were planning on it regardless. I think their best course of action here is maybe getting a cheaper veteran receiver. Because again, let's be honest, the main attraction for this team to build that receiver room is going to be through the draft. But getting a veteran like maybe Sammy Watkins, get him for 2 years, 12 to 14 million to really just be the veteran in that group. I think that's a good fit. And then again, obviously you got to attack this position in the draft, whether they pick one at 7 or whether they get one in the second round. I do think that's going to be a big thing for them. If they're at 7, you're looking guys at the top of the draft again, like a Jamar Chase, Jaylen Waddle, Devonta Smith, or if you're looking in the second round, I think Terrace Marshall can kind of give you that similar possession type receiver that you're missing, obviously, with Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones leaving. So I think that's good. Again, you got Quintus Cephas there who can really be a complementary 2-3 to your offense. But again, drafting that big stud, if you will, for that team and getting a depth guy in Sammy Watkins could help them a ton.
Yeah, because I think what you do with Detroit is you don't have to pick a quarterback, right? Because if you traded Matthew Stafford and you got no quarterback back, you'd either have to bring in a quarterback, a veteran quarterback to quote unquote tank this year, or you'd have to draft a quarterback and hope that he's going to kind of deal with the bumps and bruises of his rookie season. And then you can build around him next offseason. I think what they're in a position to do this year, we just talked about it before we started recording. These 4 quarterbacks in this draft class are phenomenal prospects.
Great. Yes.
I like all 4 of these guys for Detroit if they are there at 7, but I don't think they're going to force it either. I don't think they're going to move up for a quarterback. So if they stick and pick at 7 and Trey Lance is still on the board and they want to pick Trey Lance and put him behind Jared Goff, because I do think he could benefit from a year off of learning, then you're in a great position to do that because Jared Goff's a veteran in this league. He can get you through a season. He's not an injury prone guy or anything like that. So you definitely are able to protect a young quarterback with Jared Goff if you choose to go that route. But I think the way that they're built right now is just suck this year, let Jared Goff ride it out. If you pick a quarterback this year, next year, whatever, it doesn't really matter. You're a rebuilding team. You're not really trying to win.
Yeah, and I fully agree. Again, The thing with them is they're in a pretty peculiar spot with Goff because obviously, again, the team does not view Goff as the long-term answer. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been acquired as a cap dump. What I think happens here is, again, you take a guy like Trey Lance, Justin Fields, whoever falls. Sorry for a second. You take whoever falls out of those top 4 quarterbacks. And quite frankly, if Jared Goff has a good year this year, his value is going to go up. And at that point, you have a young quarterback that's been developing behind him. You could flip Jared Goff. Again, you take that receiver. If you take a young Lance, Fields, Wilson type in the first, you have to take the young receiver in the second. I don't care.
Or bring back Holiday if you want to, potentially.
They don't even have the cap, though. I looked at it. I mean,
it's a tough situation, but
I think
either way, we're talking about the receiver core, so we don't go on a huge tangent about the quarterback situation because we already did do that on the quarterback episode. If you guys want to check that out, but so I think what the Lions do at receiver is probably draft a guy pretty early, assuming they don't bring back their high-end free agents that they have, and they probably also bring in some veteran depth as well.
For sure. Again, like as I mentioned, you got the top 4 at that 7th pick if you choose to. If you go with the quarterback with that pick, a guy like Terrace Marshall in the 2nd round makes so much sense for them. So that being said, we can move off them. Let's get to another team that really needs a stud receiver because obviously, again, they're losing the big cat of this entire group. We can all agree in the community that Allen Robinson, as good as Kenny Golladay is the best and premier receiver in this free agency class.
Chris Godwin, sorry.
Oh, well. Okay.
I mean, if we account for age, Chris Godwin's the best one in the class. But Robinson's probably the best player. I don't know. Chris Godwin's pretty close to him in talent too. But either way, Robinson's a free agent. I personally just don't think he wants to be in Chicago any longer. Great. He's dealt with some bullshit in Jacksonville. He's dealing with some bullshit in Chicago. I don't think he's just going to sign to a team that offers him the most money. I think he's going to sign to a team that has a good quarterback that can probably win. And I mentioned Green Bay already. If they were to offer him some money, I guess him and Devontae Adams are kind of similar players. But I mean, I don't think anyone's going to bat 2 eyes if they bring in both guys and just kind of move them in and out of the slot and out to the outside. I think that'd be a great fit as well. Maybe it's a tag and trade situation for Allen Robinson. The Bears do have the option to franchise tag him if they don't want to just let him walk, because I'm sure if they franchise tag him and trade him to whatever team he wants to go to, they could get a 2nd round pick, a 3rd round pick for him. But I think regardless, he's played his last down for Chicago. Mooney and Miller are really your only options outside of Allen Robinson. So I think you probably have to address the position either in free agency or in the draft. And I think given their draft capital, where they sit in the draft for both the 1st and 2nd round, it makes sense to draft a receiver. Yeah,
no, fully. Anyways, I do agree with you. A receiver in the 1st or 2nd, as you mentioned, a guy that would actually fit tremendously. I know we're not talking specific prospects to specific teams. You're losing Allen Robinson. Why don't you just get Allen Robinson 2.0 and Rashad Bateman?
Rashad Bateman's a lot like Allen Robinson, the big possession receiver, route runner type. I think that would be a tremendous fit. Obviously, you got to figure out who's playing quarterback for the team after that, but we're worrying about one position at a time. So to the next division that we have here is the NFC South. There's a little bit less receiver needy teams in this division. As we all know, the NFC South has probably the best receiving cores through and through from each team of any division in football. So the NFC South, New Orleans Saints, they have Michael Thomas, and they seem content with only having Michael Thomas. They have Traquan Smith on the roster still. He's still on his rookie deal. Emmanuel Sanders, I believe, is a free agent after this season. I don't see them adding too much to this receiving core. They'll probably add somebody, probably via the draft, because as we've talked about on numerous occasions, they don't have any money to add a free agent receiver. So if they add a receiver to this core, it's probably a 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round pick that you throw in there. Maybe it's a deep threat. Maybe it's a slot guy. Who the heck knows with New Orleans? But I don't anticipate them adding much of anything.
They couldn't, even if they wanted to be quite honest, because again, you mentioned they have no cap, and even like the draft capital that they do have, they're not going to be spending at a receiver position that, quite frankly, they don't need. They have holes on defense that they need to fill. We've mentioned multiple times we don't think Taysom Hill's the answer, so
they'll probably have to cut some valuable players. They have to let a couple of them walk in free agency. Marcus Williams and Sheldon Rankins, to name a few. So they're going to have to fill their holes in the draft likely, because unless they're just going to just cheat somehow and get under the cap with keeping all their players and re-signing everyone, which I know the salary cap is somewhat flexible, but I don't think it's that flexible. They're going to have to let some people go.
Yeah, I don't know how they're already $100 million over, but That's life. Anyways, let's get into the next team. And I mean, that's your team. You could just tell them how it is.
Yeah, I don't anticipate much to be happening at the receiver position for this team either, because so on paper, right, you look at this team and Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown are both unrestricted free agents. So there is a chance they could add a receiver of some kind. But I think if they add a receiver, it's one of those two guys, basically. They're going to bring back one of, if not both of Chris Godwin and Antonio Brown. I think what they're probably going to do is franchise tag Godwin, re-sign AB to a cheap deal, because I don't think AB needs money. I think he wants to win. Could hinge on whether or not they win the Super Bowl this weekend. If they win the Super Bowl, maybe AB wants to run it back. If they lose the Super Bowl, maybe he wants to try again. Either way, I think Godwin for sure, I think, is getting franchise tagged. That's the rumblings I'm hearing. As a Bucs fan, I'm very plugged in terms of who like writes articles and stuff. I just read all of it. So I think Chris Godwin is probably likely to get franchise tagged. So those of you that have seen the Indianapolis is going after Chris Godwin rumors, I honestly just don't think he's going to be available.
Yeah, for sure. But I know you would hate to see it, but just imagine Andrew Luck came out of retirement and then Godwin went there.
Yeah, that'd be pretty good.
That would hurt you, I know, but
even if Godwin were to leave, Antonio Brown's 100% back then. Like if that happens, Antonio Brown is a Buccaneer. Like that's what's going to happen. I would really not like it if they chose Antonio over Chris Godwin, though.
There you go. Most talented receiver in the last decade. Your boy.
Yeah. I mean, I love Antonio Brown as a player.
Mess with you.
Chris Godwin's 24 years old.
Yeah, and not a head case.
Yeah, exactly. The opposite, actually.
We can get to the Falcons. Again, we briefed over it multiple times. They don't have necessary cap to really be able to bring anybody in, nor do they have the draft capital to.
Nor do they have the need, really.
That's what I mean. Like, they don't have the draft capital or the need to really assign to the receiver position. Again, we've mentioned multiple times, Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, your top two receivers, you're fucking set already. And then you got tertiary options like Russell Gage, that Powell guy. I don't know what his first name is. Zacchaeus. Like, you got options that can give you speed, can give you versatility. So I just don't think
unless you trade Julio Jones, you're probably not addressing this position. I don't think Julio Jones is probably even going to get traded. There's a chance because it's a new regime coming in. Maybe they want to clean house, get rid of Matt Ryan and Julio Jones just because it's the old regime's kind of darlings. But I don't anticipate if Julio gets traded, I'll be a little bit shocked. I don't think it's probably going to happen. And even if that does happen, I think whatever capital you get for Julio is probably used to replace Julio. So if you get a first round pick, you probably take a receiver in the first round to replace him. Yep. So I don't think it's because we're talking about free agency right now. I don't think it's very likely that the Falcons add a free agent receiver.
I agree. And then finally, the last team in this division, the Carolina Panthers. Again, they're probably not going to bring back Curtis Samuel, if I were to guess. And if that's the case, I mean, we've talked about it before. A good fit for a Rondale Moore would be a team like this. You can get even like a Kadarius Toney, just a guy that can kind of give you a little versatility onto your offense.
The point of this is that they're going to draft somebody to replace Curtis Samuel and not sign somebody. Unless they re-sign Curtis Samuel, I don't think they're going to sign a veteran wide receiver because they already have some money wrapped up in Robbie Anderson. They have money wrapped up in their running back, who's basically a wide receiver, and they're going to have to pay DJ Moore in a year or two. So they're probably not going to want to sign a big contract receiver. So I'd imagine they're just going to draft a Rondale Moore in the third, fourth round, draft whoever, the Kadarius Toney in the second round, or whatever the case is. I think they're probably going to be looking for versatility and speed in their receiver because that's kind of how their offense is built. So yeah, I just don't think they're going to sign anybody.
Agreed. Now we go into my team, the Dallas Cowboys. And they're a very interesting team because everybody knows at this point, the Cowboys have one of the best receiver trios in the league. That you just locked up Amari Cooper to a 5-year, $20 million per year contract last offseason. You drafted CeeDee Lamb, who was my wide receiver one at 17th overall last year. They don't need a receiver. The problem with that, though, they don't need a receiver this year going into the 2021 season. However, following this season, Michael Gallup is a free agent. And Michael Gallup, I think he's proven it over these last 2 years, is going to get north of 14, 15 million on the open market because he's proven, again, 23 years old. He had a 1,000-yard receiving season. This year had nearly 900 yards with a backup basically the whole year. I don't think the Cowboys are going to be able to afford him. And if that's the case, I think drafting a tertiary option that can prove to be your wide receiver 4 this year and then end up replacing Gallup as your 3 in the long term is probably their best road of action. So you're looking at, okay, where can the Cowboys really bring in this sort of third, fourth receiver for the future into this team? And I think this year, given the depth and the overall structure of this class, getting a guy like Jaylen Darden, Dwayne Eskridge, one of those fourth round type receivers would make a ton of sense to them. Again, you're losing Cedric Wilson too. I didn't even mention you're losing Cedric Wilson this year, who was your wide receiver for this year. Getting a guy like that in the fourth round to, again, replace Cedric Wilson here and then end up getting the replacement for Michael Gallup down the stretch, I think is going to be your best course of action. So it's going to be tough if you don't address the receiver position this offseason, whether it's the draft or getting a cheap fourth option. It's going to be tough to just rely on a rookie going into the 2022 draft. So again, I mentioned it. I think drafting a guy this year makes a ton more sense than just bypassing the position as a whole.
Yeah,
I know it was weirdly worded.
More of a taxi squad type receiver for dynasty purposes if the Cowboys do address the position. So not someone that's going to be overly valuable right away for fantasy purposes if they were to get drafted. Even if they take one like the third round or something, probably still not someone that's overly relevant for fantasy purposes next year.
Agreed.
To a team that absolutely needs some relevant fantasy receivers this year, and that's Philadelphia Eagles. We've already talked about their cap situation as well. They have no true alpha wide receiver on their team. Alshon Jeffrey is old and probably going to get cut if his contract even allows for that. Deshaun Jackson, same thing. Basically, what you have on the roster is a bunch of young, unproven guys like Jalen Reagor, Travis Fulgham, John Hightower, who you drafted last year. You just don't have a lot there, and I think you need to inject some youth, some talent, and hopefully some experienced youth and talent too, because you do need production out of it right away. And to me, Jamar Chase just makes way too much sense. Number 6 overall, you have that pick, whether it's Chase, whether it's Smith, whether you like Waddle the most, that probably wouldn't be the greatest fit. But I think you got to draft a receiver at number 6 overall because you can't really sign one.
Yeah, no, fully agree. Again, this is what they have to do. You don't have the cap space. You don't have true alpha wide receiver weapons for either Wentz or Hurts, whoever you decide to be your quarterback. Getting a guy like Jamar Chase, again, the physicality on the outside could really complement what you got with the speed element of a Jalen Reagor in that offense. Really just building a young foundational weapon for whoever's going to be your quarterback. I think that's the pick. If they bypass receiver at 6, I'm going to be incredibly surprised.
Yeah, I agree. And if you guys got to this far in the video, I'd encourage you to go down, leave a like, comment any of your thoughts down below relating to the video, relating to anything that we do, you do, your dynasty team does. All of that helps us in the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and hit the bell icon so you're notified anytime we post videos. Danny will have the draft guide announcement put up on the screen right now. We forgot to have it up this whole time, but the draft guide pre-order is now live. If you guys want to go check that out, we have basically anything and everything rookie related, dynasty related in that draft guide, rookie write-ups, rookie profiles, player cards, rankings, how to watch film, how to evaluate players yourself, just continuous content coming after the draft, during the draft. Everything's going to be put into that draft guide. So make sure you guys are pre-ordering that into the next theme we got here.
For sure. And yeah, you guys can see that little banner going on at the bottom of the screen.
You also get a chance to be in a dynasty league with me and Danny too. I forgot.
For sure. Y'all think I'm overrated? Come beat me. I'm kidding. I know nobody's saying that because
with him. He tries to screw you in trade.
Hey, it's value based. Anyways, we're gonna get into the Washington football team, and it's no secret this team needs playmakers outside of Terry McLaurin. Bad as their quarterback is, let me tell you, their receiving core after Terry McLaurin is almost just as bad. I mean, the guy that makes a ton of sense here, in my opinion, would be Marvin Jones. And he seems like a Washington player, if you will, kind of going under the radar, productive.
Their whole franchise is under the radar.
Yeah, like productive, quiet, just goes and gets to work. I think he would be a perfect complementary possession boundary type receiver to really go opposite of the smooth moving ability of Terry McLaurin. So if you're talking about an average per year contract, I think a 2-year deal anywhere from 12 to 14 million per year, I think is probably what he's going to get on the market. So we'll say for reference, this is a 2-year, $25 million deal. But they're not done there, because guess what? Steven Sims, Cam Sims, whatever fucking other Sims they have on their roster, ain't
Sims
it?
2 Pets, the video game.
For real. So, I mean, I think a guy that would, or a spot that would make a ton of sense for them to address the position, again, say they bring in Marvin Jones, getting a slot option. We're talking about, I already mentioned a guy like Darius Toney or Rondale Moore, and Elijah Moore too makes a ton of sense for them. You address the position, you get a more dynamic and versatile offense in that sense as well. One of those guys available in that 2, 3, 4 round area would make a ton of sense for them to be that wide receiver 3, obviously, again, next to Marvin Jones and Terry McLaurin. So that's what I got here. Sign Marvin Jones, 2-year, $25 million, and then draft that tertiary option in that round 2 to 3 type range.
Yeah, that makes total sense. They need to add pieces to the offense. You have 2 established playmakers, probably 3 if you include Logan Thomas, with Gibson, with Terry McLaurin. Maybe you include J.D. McKissic in that. So your other positions on your offense are good. You really just need to address your quarterback position and probably add a receiver or 2 to help him out even more. And you could have a very good offense because we already know you guys at Washington football team have a good defense, a championship caliber defense. So I think just beefing up your offense to that point that your defense is at is definitely what jumps you from a team that just barely snuck into the playoffs in a bad division to a team that can legitimately win 11, 12 games.
100%.
Yep. All right. So to the next team that we have here, we have the New York Giants. Another team that is definitely in need of wide receivers, I would say. I, as a core, I don't think a team helped their quarterback less than the New York Giants wide receiving core. The team is currently just over $2 million in cap space, but they can make north of like $20 million available by cutting some of their big name contracts, Nate Solder, Golden Tate. And basically what you need is you need to round out your receiving core with a true alpha. Like Allen Robinson makes a lot of sense here.
Yep. Allen Robinson makes the most sense. Again, adding a top 10 or so talent at the position like an Allen Robinson gives this offense a true playmaker on the outside and really takes the pressure off their identity on offense, and that is Saquon Barkley at this point. And let's be honest, Daniel Jones needs a guy he can rely on. I think this is
what it did for Josh Allen, who had question marks going into his 3rd season. And if Daniel Jones has a guy like Allen Robinson, I can assure you he's going to average more than probably the 6.5 yards per attempt that he averaged.
100%. So again, adding that true elite alpha to the outside would be a slam dunk signing and fit. Talking about a potential contract here, I do think he's going to look at the Amari Cooper signing as a baseline for what he wants. And again, people have to understand economics. If you're viewing yourself in a similar tier to someone that already got paid, you use that contract as the baseline and then add a couple million onto it. Because again, let's be honest here. If he got paid in 2020, well, that same contract in 2021, due to inflation, due to basic economics, is going to be worth more. So in theory,
economics for Danny, like it.
Yeah. So in theory here, if Amari Cooper's making 5 for 100, I think Allen Robinson can get somewhere in the 3 for 64 type range. Again, because he's in the open market, I don't think he's going to get that long-term type deal. But again, 3 years, just over 20 million per year. We currently have it at 21.3 million. I think would be a perfect type value for a guy like Allen Robinson. So if you're the Giants and you're a Giants fan, you're probably looking at the screen just excited and thinking of the possibilities of adding that true playmaker. Because guess what? Allen Robinson is a freaking stud, and you should be through the moon if he signs with your team.
Yeah, and that's a big contract too. That's over $20 million per season. That's the only way you're getting him, New York. Yeah. I don't think he wants to go work with Daniel Jones unless he's getting money, and that's a lot of money for him. So I think if I'm New York, I break the bank for a big name wide receiver because you have to see what you got in your quarterback, and you're not going to get that if Darius Slayton's your number 1 target. Darius Slayton is a guy that me and you both like, but he's not a number 1 receiver. He's a field stretcher. So you need a number 1 receiver. And Allen Robinson has proven time and time again with horrible quarterbacks that he's a number 1 receiver. So to the NFC West, the Arizona Cardinals is the team that we're going to talk about most in depth in this division, I would say. It's not a glaring hole on their team, the wide receiver position, but I think they're another team that just needs to sign some veteran depth, I would say.
Yeah, no, fully agree. And a guy from the veteran depth perspective that makes a ton of sense for them. A guy like DeMarcus Robinson, obviously with the news, if anybody's paying attention to going into the Super Bowl, him and I believe it was Daniel Kilgore are actually on the COVID list because the team was getting haircuts and the barber contracted COVID the day of. And those two were,
Jesus.
Those two were the ones that got their haircuts, and guys like Patrick Mahomes and
he's got head and shoulders, so he doesn't need to touch his haircut.
No, but other big players were in line, ready to get a fucking haircut. But the team, as soon as they found the fucking positive test results, yanked the barber, yanked those two players that already got their cuts, and just said, see you later, made them leave the building right away. So Demarcus Robinson's not going to be playing in the Super Bowl because his freaking barber was giving him a haircut.
Apparently they haven't tested positive yet. So if they continue to test negative, they could still play. But
that's fair.
Yeah, as of right now, I don't think they can travel with the team just yet. So they might be a late arrival to Tampa Bay.
Anyways, that's a shitty situation for Demarcus Robinson, but what's not a shitty situation is signing with a team like Arizona in the offseason. You go in, you be their wide receiver 4 or 5, and you've proven that you can be a veteran playmaker when called upon. That's what a team like Arizona really needs to really develop that young quarterback in Kyler Murray. So talking about the contract details, I think anywhere like 3 years, $10 million could probably be enough for Demarcus Robinson. I think that could be a really good value of the free agency period for a team like the Cardinals.
Yeah, because fantasy community wants Christian Kirk to break out every single year, it seems. Yeah. He's just not doing it, and he's had the opportunity. So if anyone touts Christian Kirk breakout rumors this year, it ain't happening. He's had the opportunity for 2 years now. So I think Larry Fitzgerald hasn't officially retired yet, but if he does retire, this does make sense to add someone to your core. If Larry Fitzgerald comes back, I mean, maybe they leave their core the way it is. Who the heck knows? And just add a tight end or something like that, or a running back to your offense. But I think they probably need to do all of the above and add playmakers at all levels, because Kyler Murray, while he had a good season this year, he did have some down games and some down stretches. So you want to put as much talent around him so you can have him get to that Patrick Mahomes level tier, that Josh Allen level tier that we saw this year, that Deshaun Watson level tier, that he is the offense and he goes as the offense goes. It's not dependent on playmakers. And the only way to get him to that point is to put playmakers around him and have him improve his confidence and improve his game that way.
100%. Dak Prescott too. But
yeah, sure. I mean, like I know it with Dak, but I just don't want to say it because then we'll just get a bunch of negative comments. But that's good. That's good for the YouTube algorithm too. So yeah, Dak Prescott in that tier also. So the Los Angeles Rams, another team that is just really not in the place to be adding a receiver. They have Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods both under contract for another year at least. They drafted Van Jefferson last year in the second round to replace Josh Reynolds, who is a free agent this offseason. So I think with those three guys, they're probably just set at their top 3 receiver positions. And if they add someone, probably a low-end free agent or, again, another draft pick, maybe a 4th round pick, 5th round pick, just to round out the receiving core, or they even re-sign Josh Reynolds.
Yeah, no, fully. Again, and not to mention, like, I think Van Jefferson could be fine as your 3 if you decide to.
I think he can too. I thought he was, in terms of, I mean, and this was.
He looked polished.
Yeah, he was polished and he was mature as a player. And that makes sense because he was like 24 years old or something in college. So a lot of people hated him for dynasty purposes because he was so old, but it makes sense. He had a pretty easy transition to the NFL. When he was called upon, he made plays. So if he gets a bigger opportunity next year with Josh Reynolds coming out of the picture, if he goes to a new team, then he has a potential to contribute a little bit for fantasy, but a lot for fantasy if either of the top 2 guys went down.
For sure. Anyways, we'll move past the Rams and look at the next team in the division, and that's going to be the Seattle Seahawks.
Pretty similar situation for them too.
Yeah, I mean, they signed Josh Gordon to be their 3 last year, and then he missed half the year, and then after he missed that time, ended up basically getting expelled from the NFL. I don't know what's going on there, but anyways, I hope Josh Gordon, for his own personal and mental sake, can battle and fight back against addiction, because that's a tough battle to go through. But anyways, let's look at it from an NFL and football perspective. I think a guy like Brashad Perriman, again, I mentioned 3 for 10 for a guy like Demarcus Robinson. You bring Brashad Perriman on like a 1 year, $3 to $4 million type deal. He could be your wide receiver 3-4 and really give you stability outside those 2 studs you have in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. I think would be a tremendous fit for this team.
Yeah, and Russell Wilson can throw a deep ball, and there's one guy who can actually catch deep balls, and that's Brashad Perriman. And he, as a number 3 receiver in Tampa Bay, behind Godwin and Evans 2 years ago, was a great player in that role. Obviously, he didn't have that kind of role with the Jets because he was like basically their best receiver. So, and if there's one thing we know about Brashad Perriman at this point in his career, after being a 1st round pick, he's not a number 1 receiver. He doesn't have that potential. So, as a field stretcher, that's exactly what he can do. He can be big and he can be fast and he can go downfield. Ironically, which is also what DK Metcalf can do, but to a greater degree. So,
to the San Francisco 49ers, get a room that all can do it.
Yeah, literally. To the San Francisco 49ers, the last team that we're going to talk about. And again, much like the Rams and Seahawks, they have their top 2 receivers. You have Deebo Samuel, who's coming off an injury-riddled second season, but had a great rookie season, a great playoff run before that. You figure he's either your wide receiver 1 or your wide receiver 2, depending on how Brandon Ayuk plays out. But you took Brandon Ayuk in the first round last year. Kyle Shanahan said he had him rated as his number 1 receiver, which is pretty surprising. But given how Ayuk performed, it doesn't really shock me because he has lived up to every bit the first round billing that he got. So I think at this position, you're really just looking to add depth. You're looking maybe to add, I don't know, maybe some size. Like, I don't really know at this point, because those two guys give you so much versatility, and you have George Kittle also as a big play and a red zone and a bigger bodied possession receiver, so that you really don't even need another receiver. I think what I would do is go out and sign like John Ross or something if I was San Francisco. Just get some straight speed. That's all he has to do for the team.
Yeah, just get your Marquise Goodwin replacement, because obviously we've seen what he did in the past with his team, being able to stretch the field, being able to really vertically test defenses. Creating that space underneath for guys like Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle would be huge for this team. So agreed. Again, like a John Ross, as you mentioned. If Seattle doesn't get Brashad Perriman, I think the Niners are another really good fit for him. So yeah, I like it. John Ross will basically ink it in pen right here, or maybe you draft one of those 5'9", 180 burners that basically flood this draft this year.
Yeah, there's like 7 of them. So to the tight end position, we talked about it. This is a pass catcher show. It's not just wide receivers, but wide receivers matter more for fantasy and they're more fun to talk about. So we spend a majority of time on them. But the NFC situation at tight end is a lot better than the AFC in terms of what teams need tight ends. I could only really come up with 4 teams that actually need to address the position in terms of, and even some of these teams, they just don't really use them. But Green Bay, because Robert Tonyan is a free agent, would need a tight end if he were to leave. But again, not really, because they have Jay Sternberger, they have Josiah DeGuara, who they drafted in the 3rd round last year. So even if Tonyan were to leave, I think they could just roll with the guys they got and be just fine. But if Tonyan does leave, then they could be in a position where they could add a tight end. Carolina has Ian Thomas as their only tight end right now, and a lot of people liked him as a lot of people liked him as a deep sleeper, but Kyle Pitts would make a lot of sense for Carolina if they didn't want to pick a quarterback, maybe just take a best player available type situation. And Kyle Pitts absolutely is worth the 8th overall pick in this draft. If TJ Hawkinson went 8th overall, then Kyle Pitts is deserving of going 8th overall. The Arizona Cardinals, to me, are the team that needs a tight end most in this conference. And then the Seattle Seahawks also need a tight end as well, because I don't think Greg Olson's still a football player, but he might be. And Will Dissly's got like 7 knee injuries at this point and a couple Achilles injuries. So from the Packers perspective, we think that we should just bring back Robert Tonyan. He had a breakout season. He's an RFA, so you don't need to re-sign him. You could just put a 2nd round tender on him or something like that. And I don't think another team is going to match that offer sheet. And if they do, you just have to match what they offer him, basically, which is how RFA works. So Robert Tonyan back to the Packers makes a lot of sense to me. From a dynasty perspective, though, I'd be a little hesitant of buying Robert Tonyan because I think he is at his peak value right now.
Yeah, I agreed. Again, the thing with fantasy, the thing with the stock market, we're the fantasy stock exchange for a reason. You want to buy at value. You don't want to buy at peak, because if you buy at peak,
you could have got Robert Tonyan for absolutely nothing last year.
Again, yeah, like if you buy everything at peak value, it can only go down from there.
Not necessarily. If Robert Tonyan, like I know that's the popular sentiment. Sometimes you do want to buy high on guys, because if you think of AJ Brown last year,
there's a difference between
I'd be willing to be buying high on that.
There's a difference between buying high and buying at their ceiling, though.
Yeah,
if you buy high,
Tonyan's ceiling is probably like a 10 touchdown, which is what he did.
Tight end 5'6",
the like 600 yards, 10 touchdowns, which is exactly what he did. I don't think he's going to get 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns someday. I don't think he's that type of player. I think he was more a product of Aaron Rodgers playing out of his mind this season. And the regression articles and the regression monsters are going to be out all offseason telling you how Aaron Rodgers is going to regress. And that does apply to Robert Tonyan as well.
And how Robert Tonyan caught more touchdowns than he had targets that weren't caught. Incomplete targets intended for him. That's insane. But anyways, with that being said, anything else you want to add on the NFC, or can we move on to the outro?
No, I want to talk about the Cardinals real quick, just because I said they were the team that I think most needs a tight end. They're probably out of Kyle Pitts' range in terms of their draft slot. I don't know. We never know with tight ends. He could slip a little bit because he is a tight end. It's not really an important position. But they have pick number 16. Kyle Pitts makes a lot of sense for them if they were to go that direction. But I think, honestly, what I would do instead of draft Kyle Pitts is sign Jonnu Smith. If Tennessee doesn't bring back Jonnu Smith, I think he gives you a huge element of your offense that fits really well with what you do. You spread people out. You play a lot of 4 wide sets. You could throw Jonnu Smith in the slot. He's basically just a big wide receiver. So I think that makes a ton of sense. I don't know what the contract would really look like. Maybe like 3 years, 33 million, 35 million or something like that for Jonnu. He hasn't really proven a whole lot in the NFL, but I think his ceiling, his talent, his athleticism lend itself to fit really well with what you do in Arizona.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Again, adding that athletic type option in Jonnu Smith makes a ton of sense for this team. But yeah, get Kyler Murray another weapon. And Jonnu Smith has proven when he's used, he is a dang good weapon. So
yeah, I'm pretty sure. I think going into the season, everyone who followed this channel knows that he was one of my biggest breakout picks. And
both of us,
I think I said in the video, the only thing that could stop a Jonnu Smith breakout is a Corey Davis breakout, which is exactly what happened, which I didn't think would happen, but it did. So the worst happened. If he goes to a team where he has a chance to be the number 2 target, Jonnu Smith, I think he could really do a lot of damage. And I mean, if he goes to Arizona, the same thing will probably just happen. Christian Kirk will break out. But yeah. Anyway, yeah. I think we can outro this now. This has gone pretty decent amount of time so far.
With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you made it this far in the video, made it throughout the whole video, comment down below bandana just so I can see who the true OGs, who the true people that made it this far are. With that being said, I know that you guys can clearly tell I'm recording this on the side. Had some technological difficulties on the outro for the video. But with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys next week for more quality content. Peace out.